After the coming-of-age ceremony, many classmates took the opportunity to confess to their longtime crushes. Everyone thought I would use this chance to cling to Jeremy West and force him to be with me. But even after the crowd had dispersed, I never showed up. What Jeremy didn't know was that at that very moment, in an empty classroom, I was straddling the lap of his best friend, forcing myself to speak despite my nervousness. "I'm right here in front of you now. You don't need to look at my photos anymore." George Curry looked down at the hem of my school skirt, which I had deliberately shortened by 10 centimeters. His jaw gradually tensed. "Allison, if you get off me now, it's still not too late." At the banquet that followed the ceremony, almost everyone was drunk. Even the usually shy and timid girls were confessing their feelings under the influence of alcohol. A close classmate quietly asked me, "Allison, aren't you going to tell Jeremy West how you feel?" Jeremy was surrounded by a crowd. Some giving him love letters, others handing him little gifts. He responded politely and gentlemanly, his voice warm, but still turned down each girl one by one. When Monica, the class belle, shyly approached to confess her feelings, the atmosphere in the private room reached its peak. Some classmates glanced at me nervously, but I simply smiled and quietly stood up to leave. Just as I stepped out, Jeremy turned Monica down. "Wow, you even rejected the class belle? What kind of goddess are you looking for? Could it be that Allison Lopez annoyed you so much you've become a misogynist?" "Speaking of Allison, where is she?" "She was here during dinner. I heard she was looking for someone to shorten her skirt the other day. Bet she went to change into battle gear. Sounds like she's planning to take Jeremy down tonight." Jeremy, holding a glass of wine, leaned casually against the wall. As he listened to his buddy's chatter, he let out a faint, mocking laugh. "She has what it takes. Allison's pretty though, right? You really feel nothing at all? Seriously. Those legs, so long, so pale, so slender. And that sweet little face, her smile kind of melts me. If you're so weak to her, why don't you go home with her tonight?" Jeremy's voice suddenly turned cold. He glanced at the empty seat where I had been, then walked out of the room. Now that we were all 18 and legally adults, many couples, or those in ambiguous stages, knew exactly what they wanted. Word had it that all the nearby motels and hotels were fully booked. Some of the bolder girls in our class had even slipped room keys to the boys they liked. After being restrained for so long, everyone wanted to indulge a little. If it had been the old Allison, she'd probably be clinging to Jeremy too. I hailed a car by the roadside. Just then, a message popped up on my phone. It was from Jeremy. "Monica just confessed to me. Should I say yes?" It was only then that I realized our last WeChat conversation had ended 2 months ago. The last message I sent him had gone unanswered. And after that, I never messaged him again. If I didn't reach out, of course he wouldn't either. That he messaged me today was unexpected. But I didn't reply. I just exited the app. As I entered the school gates, new messages kept flooding in. Every one of them was a screenshot of Jeremy and Monica's official couple announcement on social media. I opened the post and saw a picture of Jeremy holding Monica close. Really close. But strangely, I didn't feel anything. 3 months ago, I had suddenly realized. I had been transmigrated into a steamy romance novel, as the cannon fodder second female lead. Jeremy was the male lead. And Monica? She was the heroine. She was also my half-sister. Once I found out about Monica's true identity, I hated her to the core. And because I constantly opposed her, I brought about my own tragic ending, locked away in a psychiatric ward by Jeremy, dying miserably before the age of 30. Even when I was reading the novel, I didn't care for the male or female lead. Instead, I was drawn to the side character George Curry, who didn't have much screen time. The author once hinted that George liked someone, but the novel ended abruptly, and that plot thread was never resolved. I kept wondering who that girl was. Until a month after I entered the story, I stumbled upon George's secret. It was late that night, long after evening study had ended. I returned to the classroom to retrieve the phone I'd forgotten, only to find George sitting in my seat. His phone screen was lit up, displaying a photo of me. The classroom was quiet, so quiet I could hear the faint heaviness of his breathing, and the occasional sound of his arm bumping the desk, creating a faint, grating scrape on the floor. I stood frozen in place, flustered and helpless. Only then did I truly realize, this novel was as wild as it was deranged. George noticed me. But he didn't stop. Only after everything ended did he stand up. He lowered his head and tied the drawstring on his sweatpants, then looked up at me, his face expressionless, his voice calm. "Allison, have you seen enough?" It took me ages to stammer out a response. Seen enough. "Wait, no, I didn't see anything." George chuckled lightly, and as he brushed past me on his way out of the classroom, I caught a clean, woody scent from his body. And at the end of that scent, something oddly suggestive. My cheeks flushed instantly. But George suddenly stopped walking, turned back, and said, "Jeremy isn't right for you." I looked at him in surprise. "George?" But he had already turned away again. "Forget it. Pretend I never said anything." George was famously untouchable at school. A prince from the prestigious A city, with looks too enviable to describe. At night, in the girls' dorms, his name came up in every whispered conversation, but he was aloof and proud, always keeping to himself, and never sparing a glance at any girl. That night, however, when I discovered his secret, I realized there was a side of him no one else had ever seen. But that secret, surprisingly, stirred a quiet joy deep in my heart. When I got downstairs, I called George. It took a while before he answered. "George? Do you need something?" "I'm downstairs, by the classroom. The hallway lights out. It's dark. I'm a little scared." George didn't say anything. A few seconds later, the call ended. I leaned against the wall, dazed. Maybe George had also transmigrated into the book. Maybe the girl he liked wasn't me anymore. But suddenly, I heard footsteps echoing in the hallway. I looked up instinctively. The moonlight stretched his tall, lean figure into a long shadow. In the play of light and dark, I saw the sharp lines of his profile. A high-nose bridge, a clean, sculpted jawline. Just a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, yet who would have thought the body beneath was so breathtaking? I nervously clenched my sweaty palms. George was already standing before me. "Allison." "I'm here," I responded, straightening up almost instinctively. He gave a faint, nearly imperceptible smile. Then held out his hand. I slowly raised my slightly trembling fingers and placed them gently into his palm. He didn't say a single word more, just clasped my fingertips, and quietly led me back upstairs. George's seat was in the last row by the window. I lingered at my desk, pretending to organize the books in my drawer, putting them in, taking them out, again and again. Until finally, I gathered the courage to stand and walk over to his desk. He was leaning back in his chair, looking at his phone. When I came over, he just lazily lifted his eyes for a second, then locked his screen. I took a deep breath, moved the books on his desk aside, and opened the drawer. George raised a brow. "Allison, what are you doing?" Before he even finished his sentence, I sat down, right on his lap. Young George. Not yet 19. Right at the peak of youth and fire. The moment I sat down, his expression changed. The muscles of his thigh, beneath me, were rock hard and burning hot. His Adam's apple moved sharply up and down, and his jaw clenched tight. A cold sweat broke out on my palms. My heart pounded wildly, as if it would burst out of my chest. I reached out and took the phone from his hand, setting it aside. My throat felt dry. I turned my head and coughed softly. Then, trying my best to suppress my shyness, I whispered, "George, you don't need to look at those pictures anymore. Not like that. I'm right here. Right in front of you." Finally, I had gathered enough courage to lift my eyes and meet his gaze. A breeze swept in through the open window, making the silvery moonlight tremble. The moonlight shimmered across his face, flickering, uneven, gently blurring his features. The moon was white, but the desire in his eyes burned like fire. I was nervous, afraid, even. But I forced myself to keep holding his gaze. George's eyes drifted slowly from my face, sliding down, past the collar of my school blouse, past my tight waistline, and finally landing on the hem of my skirt, shortened by 10 centimeters. That flash of pale skin, whiter than moonlight, was blinding. Suddenly, I lowered my gaze, lashes trembling. But George raised his hand and gently grasped my wrist. His voice, deeper and rougher than usual, carried a husky, dangerous edge. "Allison, if you get off me now, it's still not too late." I was stunned at first. But in the next moment, realization hit me. My face burned. My neck flushed hot. His sweatpants were thin, barely a layer. And my skirt, so short. I shifted uncomfortably on his lap, trying to avoid what felt like a ticking time bomb about to erupt. But the hand on my wrist suddenly tightened. "George, not so hard. My wrist hurts." Before I could finish my sentence, he leaned down and kissed me. Our breaths tangled, and I heard his low voice whisper against my ear, "You're right, Allison. You're right here in front of me. Why would I look at a picture anymore?" Another kiss followed, this one overwhelming. My mind went blank. Sight, sound, everything disappeared. I could only keep my eyes open as he cupped my chin, kissing me deeply, hungrily. My fingers, weak and trembling, barely clung to his waist. Just when I was nearly out of breath, a familiar voice came from outside the door. "George? Are you in there?" The sound of the door being pushed open followed immediately. My entire body tensed. My heart nearly stopped. "Don't be scared." A school jacket, carrying that familiar woody scent, suddenly blocked out all the light. George pulled me into his arms, draped the jacket over me, hiding my face completely. "Hey, so you really were in the classroom?" Jeremy's voice grew closer. "Haven't seen you all night. What are you hiding in here for?" I clutched George's narrow waist tightly, my fingers digging in instinctively. My whole body trembled slightly. "Don't come any closer." George's voice was deep and calm, but carried a commanding, almost oppressive weight. Jeremy's footsteps stopped instantly. I felt George's hand, through the school jacket, land gently on my back. He patted it lightly, as if to soothe me. "You should go. We can talk tomorrow." Only then did Jeremy notice that George was holding someone in his arms. He let out a sly chuckle. "Ah, I see. Then I'll leave you two alone, yeah?" He didn't dare look too closely, but as he turned around, he couldn't help sneaking another glance. With the jacket covering the person's upper body, there was no way to see the face. But the exposed legs below the skirt were pale, long, and slender. A bit too much like Allison's. He took a few steps toward the door, then stopped again to look back. For some reason, he felt an odd discomfort in his chest, but George's voice suddenly rang out, cool and sharp. "Why don't you come stand right here and take a good look?" Jeremy quickly waved his hands and bolted out of the classroom. Others at school might not know George's background, but Jeremy did. He was the only one in the know. That's why, at school, the two of them were somewhat close. George was always low-key, never ostentatious. But Jeremy knew better than anyone, he couldn't afford to cross him. Still, as he left the classroom, Jeremy felt uneasy. George had been absent the entire evening. Allison had left halfway through the banquet and hadn't returned. She hadn't replied to any of his messages either. That never happened before. Frowning, Jeremy stood in place for a long moment before pulling out his phone. Just as he was about to call Allison, a message suddenly popped up on the screen. His expression shifted. He turned and hurried down the stairs. Only when the hallway was completely quiet again did George lift the school jacket off me. "It's okay now. You can come out." "Okay," I said softly, sitting up from his embrace. George leaned back in his chair and looked up at me. "Still not getting off?" I lowered my eyes and didn't meet his gaze. But I also didn't move from his lap. "George, say it. I don't like Jeremy anymore." I bit down hard on my lower lip, then finally summoned the courage to lift my head and look at him. "It's true. Because of him and Monica?" I shook my head. "No. Whether Monica's around or not, whether they go public or not. I still don't like him anymore." George didn't seem to believe me. He just tugged his lips into a faint smirk. "All right, got it." "George, don't you have anything you want to say to me?" That faint smile on his lips vanished without a trace. In the dim classroom light, his gaze was darker than the night itself. "Allison," he said slowly, "I don't care about you and Jeremy's little drama. Whatever stunt you're trying to pull tonight. This is the one and only time." As he finished, he grabbed my wrist and tried to push me off his lap. I let him. He stood, picked up the school jacket, and started to walk away. When he passed by me, he didn't even spare me a glance. I stayed where I was, frozen. But tears suddenly surged up, breaking through like a dam. In this strange world, the only person who ever loved me had already passed away. Monica and her mother would soon move in, taking away everything I now had. I came to George tonight. Not for any schemes or games. But simply because I liked him. And I thought, he liked me too. But now it all seemed like wishful thinking. To him, maybe I was nothing more than a fleeting impulse, a momentary spark of youthful hormones. Desire without emotion. "Allison, why are you crying?" I didn't know when George had come back. He was standing right in front of me again. With tears brimming in my eyes, I looked up in disbelief. The moonlight fell gently, and my tear-streaked face reflected clearly in his eyes. George reached out and wiped away a tear at the corner of my eye. "Why are you crying, Allison?" "I thought, the way you looked at my photo meant you liked me. I thought, the way you kissed me just now also meant you liked me." "George, turns out it was all in my head." I turned my face away from his hand. And took a small step back. "I'm sorry." "So, Allison," he said softly, "you're crying because you think I don't like you." I didn't answer. I just choked out a small nod. George reached out, pinched my chin gently, and lifted my face again. His long fingers brushed away the tears from my lashes. "Don't cry." I turned my face away again, unable to meet his eyes. I was planning to study abroad. But now, I've changed my mind. "Come with me to a city." "George?" I looked up at him in a daze. My vision was blurred, but I saw him lean down and kiss me. "Of course I kissed you because I like you." He kissed away the tears at the corner of my eyes. "Allison, how can you be this stupid?" All the sorrow that had settled like dust in my heart suddenly began to bloom into countless tiny flowers. His kiss left me weak in the knees. Clutching the hem of his hoodie, I asked in a breathless whisper, "When did you start liking me?" George didn't answer. He simply lifted me and set me down on the edge of a desk. "Focus when you're kissing me, Allison. And also, this skirt? You can only wear it on dates with me." During the first month of summer break, George and I met in secret almost every day. We hadn't made our relationship public yet. Not because we were ashamed, but because I didn't want the Lopez family to use it as leverage to climb their way into George's world. Monica and her mother were about to be brought back into the Lopez household. It wouldn't be long before I, the inconvenient daughter left behind by the original wife, would become increasingly disliked by my father. Until I was finally kicked out of the Lopez family. In the original story, this had devastated the Allison of the book. She had once been Lopez's father's little princess. But after Monica came into the picture and gradually took over her father's love, she began resenting Monica in every possible way. But me, I just wanted to sever ties with the Lopez family as soon as possible. After all, I was legally an adult now. I could inherit the assets my mother had left behind, enough to ensure I'd never have to worry about money again, and live freely on my own terms. Once that happened, I wouldn't have to worry about the Lopez family causing trouble for George anymore. George had been a little unhappy about it at first, but after I pleaded with him for a while, he finally agreed. On the day our class president organized another get-together, a friend told me that Monica and Jeremy had gotten into a fight and broken up. Honestly, it didn't surprise me. They were the male and female leads, after all. On-again, off-again relationships, dramatic love-hate sagas. That was their everyday routine. Allison, I heard Jeremy was asking about you the other day. About what? Something like what you've been up to lately, or which school you applied to. Oh. Allison, I can't shake the feeling that Jeremy might still have feelings for you. What if he comes to confess? Would you say yes? No. I was just about to say that I had stopped liking Jeremy a long time ago. But before I could speak, Jeremy suddenly stood up and walked over to me, pulling out a chair and sitting down right beside me. Allison, what have you been up to these days? I haven't seen you around at all. He reached out and rested his arm on the back of my chair. A gesture that felt intimate and suggestive. I suddenly thought. Maybe the Allison in the book was misled by exactly this kind of behavior from Jeremy. No sense of boundaries. No clear lines. She kept falling deeper until she reached her end. The perfect tragic cannon fodder girl. Jeremy had fought with Monica, so he ran to me, using his ambiguous charm to provoke her. Then once they made up again, I'd be tossed aside like a worn-out shoe. How pathetic. I stood and moved to a different seat. Jeremy looked visibly surprised. If it had been the old me, I'd already be giddy with excitement over his attention, clinging to him and rambling on. Allison, what's gotten into you lately? Nothing. I looked at him expressionlessly. It's just, since you already have a girlfriend, I think we should maintain proper distance. Jeremy stared at me for a couple of seconds, then suddenly chuckled. So Allison's jealous, huh? I nearly choked on the takoyaki George had bought me last night. Jeremy's friends started chiming in with teasing remarks. Come on, Allison, stop playing hard to get. You're gonna be the one crying later. Look at her pretending not to care, bet she's jumping for joy inside. Man, I envy Jeremy. He's never without a girl. I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. And yet, I also felt cold to my bones. Because it was true. Jeremy never had a gap between relationships. Whenever he and Monica fought, Allison, the backup girl, would naively step in. Only to suffer through his emotional whiplash. Only to earn Monica's hatred. And in the end, while the two of them got their happy ending, Allison died alone in a psychiatric hospital. Back then, Jeremy held his sweet little wife and darling children. Did he ever shed even a single tear for the girl he used and discarded? Jeremy, I said calmly, we're all adults now. Can you stop doing these childish, ridiculous things? Allison. He started to respond. But at that moment, the door to the private room opened. It was Monica. The moment she stepped in, her eyes darted to Jeremy. And instantly filled with tears. But Jeremy didn't move. He just sat there, the softest of smiles on his elegant face. Allison, I remember you love the fish here. I specially ordered it for you. Want anything else? I can ask the waiter to bring more. He never even glanced at Monica. His eyes were fixed gently on me. And I felt sick. Sick, and absurdly amused. I didn't bother responding. I stood up and turned to leave. But just then, George walked through the door. The moment our eyes met, I looked away, startled. My heart started to beat wildly again, filling with little bubbles of joy. He said he wouldn't come tonight. I hadn't planned to either. But my best friend had dragged me here. She wanted to confess to her crush tonight, but didn't have the courage to go alone. So she begged me to come with her. What I hadn't expected, was for George to show up. He hated these kinds of gatherings. Now, watching him sit across from me, my heart thumped like crazy. But I didn't dare look at him too much. I was terrified someone would notice something. George. Monica, who had been sitting in the corner with red-rimmed eyes, suddenly stood and walked over to him. I wanted to ask you something. Is this a good time? She spoke sweetly as she slid into the seat next to him. But before Monica could even sit down, George stood up abruptly and moved to another seat. Not convenient, he said coldly. He glanced at Monica with indifference. My girlfriend wouldn't be happy about it. The room instantly exploded into chaos. Monica stared at him in disbelief. George, you have a girlfriend? Is she from our class? Or our school? How come no one's ever heard about it? Yeah. Who is she? I'm dying to know what kind of girl George would like. My best friend clutched my hand so tightly she almost screamed. Allison. George was so hot just now I could cry. Did you see Monica's face? She looked like she swallowed a bug. But seriously, who's his girlfriend? George looks so capable, his girl must be spoiled rotten. I can't take this, I'm actually jealous of her. My face turned beet red. I quickly reached out to cover my friend's mouth. Keep it down. But seriously, Allison, why is your face so red? Are you sick? Flustered, I stood and made for the door. It's stuffy in here. I'm going to the restroom. Want me to come with? No need. I walked quickly to the door. Just as I reached for the handle, I could feel George's gaze on my back. Then, I heard his voice. She's from our school. She's shy. Very sweet. I didn't want to scare her, so I kept it a secret. Do we know her? Monica kept pressing. She must be really pretty and have a great figure, right? You're so picky, no way you'd fall for someone average. Someone else chimed in with a tease, she prettier than our class belle. Monica giggled shyly, don't say that. Of course she's prettier than me. Just as the door closed behind me, I heard George's calm response, yeah, she definitely is. The room instantly fell into an awkward silence. When I came out of the restroom, George was already waiting outside. Even though I had expected he would come, seeing him still made my heart burst with joy. Come with me, he said. He grabbed my hand and led me down the hallway toward the far end. Where are we going? With a gentle tug, I was pulled right up beside him. George wrapped one long arm around my waist. I missed you. We literally saw each other last night. It's been a whole day, he teased. I couldn't help but smile. How much did you miss me? You'll find out soon enough. Neither of us noticed that a classmate heading to the restroom had just caught a glimpse of our backs as we turned the corner. He immediately rushed back into the private room, shouting, I think I just saw George, with his girlfriend. The rooftop garden was in full bloom. It was the peak of summer, and the night was a kaleidoscope of color. George sat on a chair, and I knelt between his legs, slowly easing into his lap. Just like that night in the classroom. George. Did you really look at my photo like that all the time? You mean in the classroom or everywhere else? Both count. George lowered his gaze. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly. Every day. Every day? I was stunned. George, weren't you exhausted? He chuckled, then took my hand and gently guided it down. What do you think? It was like a vast desert, suddenly rising with a solitary, towering mirage. No, not a mirage, a real, impossible skyscraper, proudly standing tall. My fingertips burned and trembled. I tried to pull away, but he pressed my hand down more firmly. Allison, do you really think so little of your man? I didn't mean that. George, I'm scared. Let go for a second. Scared of what? Scared of it, I admitted honestly. I mean, sure, I'd read tons of romance novels, even sneaked in a few steamy ones. But I was only 18 when I fell into this story. I had zero experience. George was amused by my honesty. He let go of my hand, then pulled me closer into his arms. He tilted his head and kissed me, whispering in a hoarse, teasing voice, Allison, one day you're going to love it. I will not. I muttered, cheeks burning hot, ears even hotter. George cupped the back of my neck, bringing me closer. His kiss deepened and deepened, until my face felt like it was on fire. My body turned into melting wax, about to dissolve right into his arms. Allison, he murmured breathlessly. Then he gently pushed me away. I blinked up at him, dazed and confused. But he had already lifted me off and placed me gently onto a chair beside him. He grabbed a pack of cigarettes, stood up, and said in that same hoarse voice, I'm going for a smoke. I glanced downward, at a certain part of him, and couldn't help giggling behind my hand. George shook his head and tapped me on the forehead. Allison, just you wait. Wait for what? Before he could answer, Jeremy's voice came suddenly from the rooftop entrance. George, hiding out here again? His footsteps grew closer. Startled, I looked to George. He gave me a reassuring glance and walked toward Jeremy with the cigarette pack in hand. Just came out here for a smoke. Jeremy narrowed his eyes. Did you bring your girlfriend? George, you can lie to others, but not to me. We're close, remember? And hiding this from me? Not cool. Jeremy's aunt had married into a wealthy family in a city. Somehow, that made them distant relatives of the Kays. His aunt was good at networking and had built a decent relationship with Miss Curry, even maintaining frequent contact with the family over the past few years. When George transferred to our school, Jeremy's aunt had already instructed him to build a good relationship with George. As Jeremy spoke, he started walking toward me. But George immediately grabbed his arm. Jeremy. She's timid, don't scare her. Though the night was deep, George's voice sounded even deeper and colder. Jeremy flinched slightly and stopped in his tracks. You should go back. She and I still have something to talk about, George said. But Jeremy didn't leave. Instead, he asked, by the way, George, have you seen Allison? That girl disappeared in the blink of an eye. George answered casually, yeah, I saw her. She went downstairs. She left? Seems like it. Jeremy looked a little anxious. All right then, I'll go look for her. But even as he said that, he took out his phone. A few seconds later, my ringtone suddenly echoed into the night air. Jeremy's footsteps froze in place. Katy Perry's ethereal voice began to softly sing, "I don't want to keep going in circles like this.